From 2020 to 2023, the New Zealand Labour Party governed New Zealand with a historic majority. In the 2020 election, they were extremely popular and received a massive amount of power. And what did they do with this enormous power? Very little. The bare minimum. They raised the minimum wage. They kept unemployment rates reasonably low. I do give them credit for that. They introduced trade union empowering legislation, although they left it too late, and the union empowerment didn't amount to anything before the 2023 election when Labour was promptly booted out of power. For 3 years, Labour enjoyed enormous power, and their record was pathetic. Most of it has already been destroyed by National, and in large part, that is Labour's fault. If Labour introduced good policies, National may not have won the 2023 election. If Labour introduced great policies, National may have feared repealing them due to the potential political consequences. This has happened before. In the aftermath of the first Labour government, National agreed to keep many of the Labour Party's policies in place, as this was a necessity if they wanted any chance of winning an election. But Labour did a pretty pathetic job this time around. What did they do with their 3 years of ultimate power? They did some good. The trade union empowerment, minimum wage increases, and low unemployment were good things. Labour was much better than National on these issues. But other than these things, Labour achieved very little. They pursued all kinds of questionable policies that amounted to nothing. Hate speech laws, free waters, the RNZ merger. Big policies that consumed a lot of time and amounted to nothing. They had no direction and no vision. Their cabinet was plagued by a lack of discipline with constant ministerial scandals. It was as if they weren't expecting to have power and had no clue what to do with it when they acquired it. The lack of vision and direction was incredible, especially for a supposedly progressive party that had ultimate power. I know that the Labour government feared that bold policy would result in electoral defeat. And yet they faced electoral defeat anyway. At least if they passed some bold policy, they would have lost while standing for something. Instead, they faced a far worse political fate. They abandoned progressivism in an effort to win, and then lost a huge number of their seats. It was embarrassing. They worried that radical policy would alienate voters, only for countless voters to flee to more left-wing parties. People expect action from Labour. People expect a government that will push positive progress. If people want government by unimaginative moderates, they will vote for National. And that is exactly what they did in 2023. When given a choice between National and Labour trying to be National, people will always go with the real thing. We already have a party of stagnation and inaction. We do not need another. We need bold reform. We need serious solutions. And gutless Labour failed to deliver. That is not to suggest that Labour is just as bad as National. Labour is, in my view, considerably better than National on most issues. But they are nowhere near good enough, and they should never be viewed as an ideal. They had momentous power, and they squandered their opportunity. New Zealand needs reform. We need taxation reform. We need drug law reform. We need electoral reform. We need constitutional reform. Labour failed to deliver. There are countless policies that are desperately needed. There are countless bold reforms waiting to be embraced. There are countless progressive policies that Labour should pursue. A ban on big money political donations. The introduction of a proper constitution, the abolition of the monarchy, a 4-day working week, a tax-free threshold, a living wage, free public transport, free doctor's appointments, cannabis decriminalisation, the introduction of preferential voting, the lowering of the electoral threshold, financial incentives for worker-owned and controlled business models, and I could go on. These are just a few examples. The bold progressive policies that need to be implemented are endless, and gutless Labour failed to introduce them or even campaign on them. It is embarrassing. It is pathetic. Labour is better than National, but they are nowhere near good enough. They are moderates with little interest in serious solutions and bold policy. And serious solutions and bold policy is what New Zealand needs. Of course, some Labour Party members and some Labour Party politicians do believe in a more progressive Labour Party. I do recognise that, but sadly, they do not control the party. The party seems to be controlled by moderates. And like moderates, it lacks vision and direction. It lacks any interest in bold reform and serious solutions. Labour may be superior to National, but Labour is not good enough. New Zealand can do better. New Zealand deserves better.